sarà in lingua inglese. Prima di iniziare il talk do la parola a Pasquale Pellegrino che ha una comunicazione da farvi.
Okay, good morning everyone. Just a short information. I'm Pasquale Pellegrino. I work for the Piedmontese consortium of NGO, and here on the chair you will find a postcard, and on this postcard there is a short description of one project, and as part of this project we kindly ask you to fill a very short form with 2 questions. Which one of them is yes or no. It's required for our project about youth engagement and climate change. So thank you. Bye.
So good morning to everyone. I'm very happy to introduce the 4 artists here, which are part of this talk, whose title is Expanded Scenarios, Modes and Approaches to Documents and Documentary Practice. So welcome to Lisa Barnard, artist, researcher and associate professor and head of the Master Program in Documentary Photography at the University of South Wales. Mathieu, Asselin, a photographer, a lecturer at the Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Ghent, and co-founder of Double Dummy. Mónica de Miranda, visual artist, filmmaker and researcher, and Lebohang Kganye, visual artist and photographer. Now, these 4 artists are very deeply concerned with documentary practice in a very let's say, similar approach, which is a research-based approach, which looks very much like the academic research. And also they're very diverse because they articulate their research in very special and personal ways. 3 of them have got an exhibition at the Expanded Photo Festival, which you have seen or you are going to see. And only Lisa hasn't got a show, but her show is at Fotografia Europea in Reggio Emilia, so quite close for anyone who's curious to see her work. So I think that we start this conversation, each of the artists will give a presentation of the work, and then hopefully we'll got 10 minutes for questions. And so we start with Lisa Barnard, with her presentation of her work. And I'm sorry, I'm Benedetta Cestelli Guidi. I'm a researcher in photography, and I mainly work in photographic archive of the Italian state, dealing with cultural heritage. So, Lisa, up to you.
Thank you very much, Benedetta. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. In Turin. It's a wonderful city, so thanks very much. Am I operating this? I think it's a PDF, so. Okay, it's not looking good on the screen. Okay, so my brief for the talk today was just slightly different, to give an overview of my practice that is informed by this idea of expanded documentary in 10 minutes. So it's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm just going to give you a little flavor of what my practice is and what I'm interested in. At the moment, you can see it's fairly blank, but there is actually quite a nice image here that you might see in a minute. Okay, so this is an image of me at a UAV drone fair in 2011, doing a performance piece being recorded by a drone camera that was on a UAV. It was a fair that was selling cameras and selling equipment. My practice really focuses on the relationship between the screen and the speed of images and how quickly they sort of fly around us and how sort of integral they are to the underbelly of society, if you like, particularly the military-industrial complex, but also I focus my practice very much around ideas of capitalism, extractive industries, with a focus really on the ideas of the Anthropocene and how images are integral to what I consider to be one of the problems about climate change. So how that synthesis, that connection between images and the problems that we have in society today. So I'm going to start with a quote from Marx this morning for you, because I thought that would really get you fired up. And it says here, capital must on the one hand strive to tear down every spatial barrier to intercourse, to exchange and conquer the whole world, earth, for its market. It strives on the other hand to annihilate this space with time, to reduce to a minimum the time spent in motion from one place to another. In other words, the more capitalism shrinks space and speeds up time, the more it can profit. And that pretty much sums up my relationship to media and images. Bertolt Brecht is somebody that I have really been drawn to throughout my career, very early on, a Marxist, very informed by theatre and the idea of Marxist aesthetics, which I'm really interested in how images can elicit action, inspire other people to make small changes in their existence and in their relationship to the world. And Brecht says that we must not cling to the tried rules of narrative, venerable literary models, eternal aesthetic laws. We must not derive realism as such from particular existing works, but we shall use every means, old and new, tried and untried, derived from art and derived from other sources, to render reality to men in a form they can master. Our concept of realism must be wide and political, sovereign over all conventions. So my practice is really informed by this idea of play. I'm really interested in how the creative act can elicit a response in other people and can address ideas in a complex way. My practice is also very informed by Alan Sekula and everything that he stood for and everything that he became. It's terrible that he isn't here. I think he'd be such a brilliant addition to our industry. And he really believed that the idea of reinventing documentary in ways that departed from the social documentary tradition, from art photography and from the conceptual document. So he was really interested in the idea of reinventing traditional modes of documentary, and I think we all perhaps share that in common today. So these are just a couple of images. This is from a virtual Iraq project in a book published by Goss called Hyenas of the Battlefield, Machines in the Garden. And these are images that I created of Margaret Thatcher. I was commissioned to work in the old headquarters in London and found these images of her. Marta Rosler is somebody that is a huge inspiration for me, and she believes that we should be using mechanisms to activate viewers' ideas, encouraging an active, reflecting attitude. I'm not an activist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do hope to get people thinking about my practice. So the idea of play and an experience is very important. Installation work I'm really interested in, so that you move around photography and what it stands for. I use alternative practices. This is from a piece that I did in 2016. These are scree prints of 3D renders of asteroids that have very specific amounts of gold, from The Canary and the Hammer, which is published by Mac Books. And this is from the show that actually I have in Reggio Emilia. This is actually a video piece, and it's a waterfall from Iceland. You can hear the sound of the natural waterfall, but it has a Kim Assendorf machine technology effect over the top of it, which renders anything that moves vertically or horizontal pixelated. And you can sort of model it depending on what you want to sort of create and to experience. So it's really about machine learning in relation to the natural world. And this is what the show looks like in Reggio Emilia. It's more of an installation. Photography is informed by the space. The pipes are put in as part of my idea to connect to circular economy and how the use of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is very informed by energy, and how water is integral to that, hydroelectric power, geothermal, and most of the mines are or were situated in Iceland when I made this project in 2016. These are some more images. So much like this idea of reinventing photography, Sekula was really interested in this sort of triangulation of practice. You know, he used painting, he used graphic design, he used any tool that was available to him. There were not strict rules about what he was able to use. So I use audio, I paint a little bit, I use video. I'm interested in the idea of sort of light boxes to sort of elevate ideas. And this is my last image that I'm showing you from that show. And that's my information. Thank you very much.
That was very fast, Lisa.
Too fast.
No, it wasn't too fast. But we have time. Thank you so much to Lisa for her presentation. So I would like now to, we agreed that Mathieu will be the last to talk. I didn't, but we agreed beforehand. So I'd like to introduce the work, the Lebohang Kganye work. Sorry if I haven't. And we've seen her exhibition yesterday, A Burden Consumed in Sips. And so Lebohang, oh, you've got a microphone. Shall I put on your...
Do you want to control? Let me move.
Yes,
you wanna...
Okay, this is going to be fun. We do this all the time.
That's you? Yeah, so that's the mouse. You can go directly with that.
Good morning, everyone. So I am Lebohang Kganye. Yes, it's okay. An artist from Johannesburg, South Africa. I mainly work in photography. Well, I come from a photography background, but I've always been interested in stretching photography and the idea of the medium. So the work that I'll be showing you, so I'll be giving you quite an overview of my practice and then eventually speaking to the show that's currently on at Palazzo Carignano, okay. And that is one of my latest bodies of work. That is really a first work that I've made outside of South Africa. But I will start with speaking about one of my earliest bodies of work, Gilefalaga, her story.
Which is great. Sorry, can I say something? Which I've seen at Les Bals in Paris.
Yes.
And I was really so happy to meet you after that.
Thank you. So the show, so the work Gilefalaga is actually a two-part series, and it starts with me going through our family photo archives, or family photo albums. So this is about 2 years after my mother had passed away. And I was really just perhaps looking for traces, or realizing that I was also starting to forget her and forget her gestures. And so this is really how the work started. And in looking at her photos, I then realized that a lot of the clothes that she was wearing when she was still in her 20s or in her 30s, or around the same age that I was when I was looking through this photo album, were still in her wardrobe. And so this is, these are basically clothes and items that have outlived her, but that have now sort of come to represent who she was. And so I then traced, started to go to some of these locations where she had been photographed and wore the same clothes that she was wearing for these photographs, and restaged her photographs. I mean, when I started the work, I started imagining that it would be two photographs next to each other, her original photograph and then my sort of a trace of her or reenactment of her. And then later on, as the project developed, then I started to think about the possibility of what happens when I make them one image. And so I create a space where we almost continue to exist forever together in this moment. And the word Kilefalaka is, so Kilefalaka means my inheritance. And so, I mean, the work started without me even thinking about creating a body of work at the time. So it really happened organically. So I began just tracing her footsteps, finding the locations, going with my sister to these locations. So she would have the original photograph in her hand and would tell me how to pose correctly, and then, then take a photo of me in these locations. And so the work was very much about this journey of healing, but also embracing me becoming mother to my sister. And so it also is about, sort of stepping into her character to a large degree. But also the work was also very much about thinking about, photography not just as a tool of violence, but also like as a tool of healing, which I think for me to a large degree, this body of work was very much about that, but also challenging the idea of like time and and also thinking back to the literature such as death of the author and all of these themes that photography is associated with when it comes to immortality and death, or a sort of forever possibility of living through an image. And I mean, this image for me is, there's two images that are quite similar. So Moketing is an image where you see me as a child when I'm 1 year old, and then you sort of see me now as, or when I made this work as a 20-something-year-old, and then seeing my mother. But also, so there's sort of multiple existence that is taking place through this image. But also, I think what was interesting in the project was also discovering or thinking about how a space, or like, because a lot of these photographs were taken in my grandmother's yard, and so thinking about how a place has also stayed the same, but also thinking about how the idea of like archives is beyond images and it's beyond documents. So thinking about also clothes as an archive was something that I started to think about when I was working on Kilefalaka. And so the body of work, the second part, so Kilefalaka, as I said, is a two-part series. So the second part of it is Kilefalaka Earth Story, which when I started the work, so my grandmother had moved in with us, and I started thinking about how surnames were spelled differently, how there were like these 3 or 4 spelling variations of our family name, Kganye. And so I then started to trace or think about the sort of origins of family names, but also link that back to South African languages, but also a South African oral tradition, which is called Izithakazelo or Direto, which is basically it's like a praise poem that's associated with every Black surname, which is a sort of record of a family history and a family lineage. And so I started to trace our family history through the family name. And so the work really started here. So I started to travel around South Africa and meet different family members and try to get to the core of the family name and the family history, but particularly looking at this praise poem. I mean, then the project sort of took a life of its own. I obviously started to collect a lot of photographs, but from these family photo albums. So as I was engaging with these family members that I was meeting for the first time, they all sort of gave me access to the family photo albums. But also the project ended up becoming about my grandfather. So he was the first one to move from the farmlands or from the countryside to come to the city. And so he became quite central in the story, even though the initial research wasn't necessarily about him. And so all of these become these stories that then my family told me about my grandfather, who had passed away before I was born. But because he was central in the family narrative of being the one to move to the city, and so before apartheid ended, and so before, before apartheid ended, and so when apartheid eventually ended and black people were able to move more freely, different family members were able to move to the city through him by living in his house at some point before finding their own homes or before finding jobs. And so he becomes this person that's then quite central as I'm trying to do this trace of our family name and our family history. And I only had photographs of him a few photographs of him wearing a suit. And so this is one of the photographs. So I then sort of reenact these stories that I was collecting from them by wearing a suit similar to the one that he was wearing in his photographs. And at this time, I had just finished my photography studies, so I was working within a production space, television productions, and so that's how I started actually working with cardboard cutouts. So I became really fascinated with this idea of like set design and how you're able to create an entire world through cardboard cutouts and an illusion of like a space. And so I sort of then use that visual language for my own artistic practice. So I do not know if I have enough time to... Okay, so I will show you one of my earliest very short films, Thing. And this is very much informed by this idea of the family photo album. So I've been very interested in the idea of the family photo album as a space of, not just as a space of memory, but also as a space of fantasy. Because I think when I was obviously collecting all of these stories about the family history, it was also quite evident that to a large degree, the family photo album almost also became almost like a children's book. So I was thinking about children's books quite a bit at the time, as almost the space for a family to curate an ideal story of themselves. And so, to almost, get into like character or, almost curate a storybook about what the family story is, which is not necessarily the full picture or necessarily truthful. So this references or this speaks to that. So let's see if it will play and if there's sound. No, it is. Okay, let's see. It hasn't gone on yet. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I don't think there's sound because it should be on. Okay, so I'll just speak over it if there isn't sound, if the tech team isn't able to assist. So I then started to use the idea of the pop-up book. So this is really when it started. So because I was looking at children's books, I wanted to use a similar language to children's books, but what you also see is these lines that almost also speak to these old school family photo albums that I was obviously sort of going through at the time when I was doing the research. It won't have? Okay.
Sometimes the HDMI don't have sound together. We need a different cable. Yeah.
No, it's really fine. Yeah. We're not speaking for long.
Passport. You can have your cards digital. They are digital. But you still have the physical. Yeah, because sometimes you want to. Yeah, and then you cannot do that. You have taxi.
Yeah, so. Cool.
You don't mind if
I really don't. Okay. Say play, then go forward a bit. Yeah, then say play there. No, so sorry. Okay, I think I really don't. So I think
She
because,
doesn't mind if
no,
she
I
doesn't have
genuinely
sound.
don't. I think
let's
let's,
keep moving because, yeah, grazie. It's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry about it. We don't need sound, really.
cool. No problem. So, I mean, the short film is available on the website with sound, so feel free to look at it on the website. And then the work so I continued the research, and this is a work, Mohlokomedi wa Tora, that I worked on in about between 2017 and 2018, which was really the first time that I, okay. Okay. Sure. So I'll just go through these quickly. And as I mentioned, that a lot of the work is on the website, and there are downloadable PDFs that speak to all the different bodies of work. So I will go to the work that I'm currently showing during this festival. That would be great. So it's called A Burden Consumed in Sips. And so this is, as I mentioned, that it's a work that that is really quite far from the rest of my practice to a large degree, in the sense that it's not work that is linked to my personal story, but also it's the first time that I worked outside of South Africa. And so I had been invited by an institution in Cologne to basically go into their collection and respond to any part of the museum's collection. And so this was it's an ethnographic museum, the Strauss Museum. And so I was not necessarily interested in working with the photographic material from the museum. And so I then was interested in what was taken from Africa and what was in their collection that was taken from Africa. But also I was interested in the sort of female perspective. So I then eventually, after a few trips to Germany, then came across the work of Marie-Pauline Throbeck, who had traveled to Cameroon between 1911 and 1913. So she had been allowed to go on an expedition with her husband. So women weren't necessarily allowed to go on these expeditions, but she had been allowed because her husband was commissioned by the city of Cologne to basically survey the land, because he was a geographer, to go and survey the land of Cameroon, where that was basically worth them colonizing. So they had gone on this 3 years. So she had been allowed because she was a visual artist and therefore could do the drawings of the landscapes and take photographs. And all of that can then be used as part of the material for his publications. And so I then discovered these drawings. And so the work really starts with the discovery of these panoramic drawings of Marie-Pauline. And so this became the material that I became interested in working with. So what you see here at the top is me using a similar language to these drawings that she had produced during this trip. So we traveled to Cameroon to basically trace back these places that they traveled to. So this is, obviously like about over 100 years later that we were now traveling to Cameroon, and thinking about or symbolically returning these objects that she mentions in this travel diary that she then produced. So she was sending letters back home to her family and friends over these 3 years, and later became published as a sort of travel journal. And in this book that she produced, it basically speaks about all the different encounters, all the different places that they traveled to, but particularly all the different objects that they took. There's a part in it where they speak about almost having about 400 people carrying the objects that they that they were taking out of Cameroon. So that just gives you an idea of just how many objects were taken out of Cameroon. And so that's what the film is basically about. So you see me going to these different locations in Cameroon. So we had about a 13-day travel in Cameroon and went to about 13 different locations or different villages in Cameroon, and had gotten similar objects to the ones that she mentions in this diary, and then sort of placing them at these original sites that she mentions that they were taken from. So when you get a chance to go see the film, that's what the film is basically speaking to. I will just do a minute of showing you what the film or one of the channels looks like. It's a 22-panel film installation that sort of moves from drawing to then live action. So you see me walking into frame, and then okay, let's forward it a bit. Let's see. Yeah, so when you go and see it, it has sound. I mean, sound is a huge part of the experience of the film. And it references, as I said, the panoramic drawings. And so it is meant to be a very long film. I mean, we have reduced it to also accommodate for the space that we are showing in currently. But the original sort of format of it is quite large. I think it's about a 7-meter in height film. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lebohang. Sorry for the rush. Thanks so much. Do go and see her show. And now we are Mónica de Miranda. So shall I?
Sorry, I don't need to change. My images will run. Okay.
Now. So Mónica de Miranda has her work in show here exposed. It's titled As If the World Had No West. And Mónica, she's the winner of the grant that Expose gives each year to a contemporary photographer. So she's the first one. And
Okay.
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry. So I was saying that Mónica, she's the recipient of the grant of Exposed, of this year Exposed Festival grant, and the work is called As If There Was No West. No, maybe.
West, yeah.
West, yes. So, and her work is shown at the Polo del Novecento in Turin. Yes. So please, Mónica.
It's correct. Hello, everyone.
Shall I go back? Oh, no, it just...
Yeah, the slides will run on my back. I'm just showing, and I'm just talking about the work that is exhibited. It's been an intense journey to do this project, as I knew I won the grant in November. At the same time, I did the Venice Biennale with Portuguese Pavilion, and I'm here to present this work to you. And I just want to say thank you to all the team of Expos for this opportunity and festival, and thank you to my colleagues here. And I'm going to look at how my work curates what I call the living archive. So usually I look at archives that exist within elemental natural forces that recall African cosmologies. I want to start by quoting Stuart Wall. Consulting an archive represents a significant moment on which we need to reflect with care. Not an inert museum or dead works, but a living archive whose construction must be seen as an ongoing, never completed project. I'm an Angolan Portuguese visual artist researcher. I live in between Lisbon and Luanda, Angola. Afro-diasporic mother, daughter of post-independence, granddaughter of colonialism. Ghosts of memories always come to me through the history of my family. My mother and grandmother lived through the colonial war in Angola and immigrated to Portugal after independence, where the civil war broke. I was born in Portugal. My work focuses in questions about identity, place, and belonging. I'm also the founder of Hangar, a cultural and art residency space in Lisbon. The focus of my work reflects the interconnection of ecology, history, memory, body, representation, and space. I usually say that I like to listen to stories, and I like to tell stories. But usually what I've been recalling myself to do is to listen to the stories that places have to tell me. So in that way, listening to stories, I also listen to my own story of identity, migration, belonging, the environment I live, and my own experience of post-memory. My work also looks at the boundaries in between fiction within critical fabulation, combining historical archival research with fictional narratives to fill the gap of the official historical narratives. I want to start to refine the meaning of archive within the context of my work, focus the idea of living archives. By this, I mean creating a present place of inquiry, action, thought, and matter, creating an ongoing continuing space for open-ended inquiry, creating a collection of memories of body, nature, soil, and spirit, creating a space for cyclical time that interconnects past, present, and future, creating a natural space connected to the specific elements present with non-Western histories to create ecologies of care and regeneration. So really understanding through the practice what we bring through memories, how does that impact us as artists and human beings, and how we can do a practice that is also of care for us, and it connects different organisms within ourselves and our environment, within the present. So the works that I usually do, they look at this living archive of personal and collective memories which recall natural elements such as water, fire, earth, and air. I understand these elements as fire, an element that transmutes painful histories and memories. Earth, an element grounding history and memory. Water, a fluid element of healing, cleansing, and renewal. Air, an element connected to life forces, imaginations, dreams, and the future. Now I will talk about the work that you are seeing on the background, As If the World Has No East, that is being shown at Polo del 900. And it's a video and photographic work that I developed in the south region of Angola, in Namib, next to Namibia, which looks at these concepts of earth, water, and fire to understand the deep history of African cosmologies from within an Angolan context, and plants as living archives. The history that I listen in the desert, it recalls the writer Rui Duarte de Carvalho. Rui Duarte Carvalho just wrote a book called, it had the same title, but instead of being As If in the World Has No West, it was As If in the World There Is East. He was an anthropologist, he was an artist, he was a poet, and he lived in the southeast region. And his book was written in the end of the colonial rule by Portuguese, and when the independence broke. And his book brought lots of knowledge about the cosmological Angolan systems. So, recalling this title, I trace also, there is another layer as I trace a young woman's journey, which embodies the journey also of another Angolan anthropologist, Augusto Zita. Zita, he was an anthropologist. He's done a research on this region in Angola, who has been using scientific and non-Western methods as divinatory practices originating in Angolan acknowledgement systems. This research imagines the anthropological study of colonial powers. The anthropologists used to consult with a plant that only exists in Angola. It's called Welwitschia mirabilis. It's an ancient plant. This plant has been holding many histories and memories, and used to consult with the plant. This plant is an archive on itself. Many plants have been living for more than 2,000 years old. They survive pre-colonial, colonial independence times. As if the world has no east, looks at time, an archive of future memories of a journey of a young anthropologist that she traces the journey of this anthropologist. This work reflects as she goes and finds different spaces within this journey, non-linear time, looking at Bakongo time, in Angolan cosmology, is a cyclical notion that has no beginning and the end. It follows the movements of the sun, the earth, and the moon. The elements talk to her. The sun, the earth, the plants, the houses left by the Portuguese. This cycle of time, of light and darkness, dusk and dawn, death and life, she recalls through the narrative of the film. This is a cyclical feminine time that holds past. It slows time, it looks at memories, archives, colonial, deep time. Present, it brings issues of globalization, diaspora, migration. It recalls different imaginations, future time, dreams, and ideals. So, this work delves in the earth and plant cosmologies of Black histories of Angola and brings forward the plant wisdom, nature of storytelling, soil as a body that holds history and memories, and soil as nature, as living archives. I recall also the work of Amilcar Cabral, a freedom fighter from Cape Verde. He was also an agronomer, and he said the real fight, it just happens on the soil, and changing the monocultural practices to biodiversity, it's where we started the colonization. And he has a book that is called Defense of Nature. And he said that defending nature is defending humanity, and he holds that the soil, as the bodies, our bodies, they hold memories and they hold histories. And this is what I wanted to do with this film through the body of the anthropologist. She recalls within a connection with the land, bringing a relationship in between human body and nature body. And there is a dialogue recalling of all of these histories, what her body holds, what nature and the landscapes she goes through hold and have to tell her. So is the story of the land itself that is talking to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mónica, for your talk and introduction to your work, shown at the Polo del Novecento. So last but not least, Mathieu, Asselin, and I think your work is here, yeah? No. Where is it? Okay, let me close that. Let's close this one and this one, this one, this one, this one. Where are we? Solo foto, giusto? No, questo qua. Hello? Hello? Yep. Okay, Matthew's work is shown here. It's called True Colors, and he's in Villa. Sorry about that.
Villa della Regina.
Villa della Regina. So we're going to see it tomorrow with you, I think.
Yes,
maybe.
tomorrow.
Yes.
Indeed.
So please, Matthew.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here in such a wonderful day. Yes, my name is Mathieu Asselin. I'm a photographer. I'm a documentary photographer. My practice is what we call research-based, what means that all the results of my work come from this research. Not only the subject, but at the same time, the way the subject is photographed, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm gonna talk really about the work I'm showing here, even if I have done other projects like Monsanto, a photographic investigation. I did also last year in Les Rencontres a residency that finalized with this exhibition in Les Rencontres called La Chasse de la Tarasque, Hunting for the Tarasque, about a factory, paper mill, north of Arles, where I live. So we can see a little bit what I'm interested on, and I'm interested on corporate power. And so my practice turned around corporate power. To be more precise, I'm very interested on the narration of corporate power, and specifically in the ecological narration of those structures of power, big multinationals, and how this message is key today, and for me is one of the biggest threats on any type of progress in ecology. This message, what we call greenwashing, are really key for the future of the ecological transition we need. As my research has pointed, all this ecological message in multinationals, in the corporative ecological message, actually what they're doing is slowing as much as possible the real changes that need to be, that need to take place. Of course, and we all understand why, because the idea of these multinationals is to keep the status quo where they are. That means growth, and this idea of infinite growth in a finite planet. So knowing that, I'm more and more interested in working on the images that are created by these power structures, and how these images can be deconstructed and utilized to do exactly the contrary. What means to challenge the status quo and to challenge the corporate, what I call the corporate grip, that is, they're holding as hard as possible in this status quo. So the work, True Colors, is my last work, and it talks about the car industry, but more than that, it talks about the ecological narrative of the auto industry today. And in a very, and I decided to work in this because it's a very important period of time for the car industry. The car industry is switching to electric cars. And of course, with this switch, very, very important switch, is the first time, it's actually the biggest transformation of the car industry since the beginning of the car industry. Until now, yes, cars are more modern, have computers, but it's always the same idea, and a combustion engine that you put fuel and ignites and move. Today, we really are changing the heart of the car industry, that is this combustion engine, to an electric engine. So I thought that was very important to talk about this new generation of a ecological narrative of the car industry. And I always say I need kind of a column, a spine cord to talk about this narrative. And of course, what I found is I start my project with the Dieselgate scandal that was discovered in 2014. So the Dieselgate scandal for me is, I will explain a little bit, is the beginning of the end of a period in the car industry. It means the combustion engine not only is arriving to his limits, ecologically speaking, but at the same time, ethically speaking. And the Dieselgate is a very good example of that. In 2014, in the United States, was discovered that Volkswagen, but later on we realized that pretty much every automaker in the world were cheating in their emissions. Actually, they were embedding a software inside the car computers to give a completely different reading of what really the pollution was, mostly in diesel cars. And the consequences of that were quite big. So based on the Dieselgate scandal, I did a series of, not only this is the main part of the work. I can just go here, perfect. I did a series of diptychs that actually I realized that for the automakers, one of the most important selling points, it used to be semi-naked women, but now, because the ecological thing, or very macho man, is quite a macho thing, today, of course, because of the changes, the Me Too movement and all the things, the car industry is looking for new ways of selling their products. So today, landscape is quite important to sell cars. And we find in every automaker use idyllic landscapes, unknown, undefined landscapes to where these cars live. What is interesting too, I understood that how the landscape in the history of car commercials have shifted from using the landscape as a backdrop to today cars being embedded in the landscape itself. So all this point out that the landscape is quite important to sell cars and to give that idea of ecology. So I realized that many models of cars involved in the Dieselgate use landscape. So what I did is I collected the car sales brochure of these cars involved in the Dieselgate, and I took a piece of the landscape. I completely decontextualized, take the car out, and use the landscape. I go through artificial intelligence to make big pictures, and I use special patterns, because when you blow out pictures from a very small picture, it becomes almost like a drawing. So to give again this texture of photography, I use special patterns that you only can do it in a silk screen. So what I did is I silk screened this landscape from these publicities, but I silk screened these landscapes with an ink developed by the MIT, that is an ink produced by the exhaust pipes of diesel cars. So what I'm doing is reappropriating the greenwashing, these landscapes used for greenwashing, and I'm reprinting these landscapes in something that I think is more factual. Actually, all these landscapes are being polluted by not only the car industry, but in a big percentage by automakers, cars, etc., etc. At the same time, I choose around 250 colors that the car industry is using today that are related to nature. For example, jaune paille, Atacama orange. So these are all names that remind us of nature. So even through the colors and the names of the color, the industry is utilizing nature as a selling point. Also I did around 8 minutes video that is made by around 40 commercials that are used in YouTube, in television, etc., etc. And all these commercials have this kind of a very optimistic vision of the future. Of course, an optimistic visions, when you buy one of their cars, you are a part of this vision. So this is the way they see the future, and actually they are really saving us from this catastrophic future. So I realized that it would be interesting to use these commercials and to redo an editing. And to redo an editing of what I think, and factually speaking, what is to come if we keep going in this way of thinking growth and thinking transportation and all the things. So the video is a quite apocalyptic vision of what is the future to come. And it's all made by car commercials using their music, their sound, everything. So it's really a restructuring this narrative. There are some images of this 8-minute video. So the pieces are printed, silk screen printed on metal plates. That is the same material the cars use. So in one side, we have the landscape, and in the other side, I have the color with the name and the color of the colors that the company used. The interesting thing is that many of these names that we see, Atacama, for example, or Montana, or they all can be related to a problematic, environmental problematic today. For example, the Atacama Desert, we know that 80% of the lithium that are to be used in the future cars will come from Atacama, with huge environmental and social consequences. How much time I have?
1 minute.
I also use, of course, the computer that was used by these companies to embed this software, a computer that I show in the exhibition. This is another of the pieces. They are 1 meter, well, 1.5 meters. And what else I can say to finish? Yeah, I think this is pretty much. One of the other pieces you will see in the exhibition is a very long panoramic that is pictures of the motherboard of the computer with reappropriated pictures from satellite, from Google Earth. In 2014, when this Dieselgate thing happened, all these companies found themselves with thousands of cars being returned, and they didn't know exactly what to do that with those cars. So they parked it in these improvised spaces like disaffected nuclear power plants, disaffected airports, disaffected stadiums. So you have all this collection of satellite pictures of thousands and thousands of cars parking, and that we don't know what to do with that. So I did a 10 meters panoramic between the motherboard and these shots of thousands of car parking, just to remind us how such a little thing that is a software can have such a big repercussions. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mathieu. You've been running, but thank you so much for your sort of 10 minutes talk. So we've got another 10 minutes, and so I would invite the audience to, if you have any question for the 4 artists, which I want to thank for the presentation and being in the time that was given us. So, should there be any question from the public? Well, I've got a question for all of you. Given the difference of your works and your approach, so we've got an approach which is very sort of, well, you all work on research-based project, as you said, Mathieu, but in a very different way. So there is a more personal, local, based research and a more global understanding of things. And there is a sort of a performative aspect in the work of Mónica and Lebohang, and a more sort of theoretical approach in Lisa and Mathieu, as far as I can see. So there are lots of differences, but the thing that is sort of similar, and that's my question is, how, if when you start your research on different issues, as we've seen, do you already know how you're gonna display it? Because now, we've seen this multimedia approach. So you work with photography, with collage, with videos, with music. So my question would be, when you start your research, well, after you started your research, when you started gathering the material, do you already know which is the way in which you will display it? Whether it is in the form of a book or within an exhibition space, or does it grow with the work?
Yeah, I can go. I think at the beginning I was very interested on photo books. So my first work, the Monsanto, was really thought as a photo book. Actually, I was editing the work each time I came from any trip, taking pictures as a photo book. Today is a little bit more different. I'm working on. It's not better or worse, but in more complicated things to visualize. And photo books, I don't know yet. I think exhibitions for now is fitting better, but yeah, I think a photo books is a quite a wonderful way of showing a work. It is, and not only to show a work, but to work on. Even in my projects, even if it won't be a photo book, I think it's always interesting to have this canvas open where you can control everything.
I think for me, every work is different, and I think how you sort of respond to it is sort of always different. The work that we did, and Lucy, I just noticed that she's here, so she's the curator that I work closely with at the Rottenstrauss Youth Museum, so they're the ones that commissioned the film that I ended up doing in Cameroon. And for me, I saw the material and I immediately knew, so when I saw the drawings, I immediately knew that I wanted to do a film. And which doesn't happen often. And so I think with seeing the drawings and the format of the drawings, I knew that the film would be this long panoramic film. So that for me, to a large degree, was sort of me responding to this archival material. And so I think because I work with archival material a lot, my process is always very much about the sort of response to the material.
For me, when the work is research-based, you work with some unknown factors. So I let sometimes the work guide me, and there'll be more there than if I just start with a preset of ideas of what the work will be. Even the ideas of the work, you might have an idea, a concept, but as the research develops, it takes you to other places. Of course, you have your mediums that you are more comfortable to work with, that you always take along, like your palette of colors, saying that. But in the research, it's good to leave space for other colors to come in and to experiment. And I actually was trained as a sculptor, and I do film and photography. So the way of the sculpture, he also teach me how to look at things in a three-dimensional way. So you have volume, and this volume comes from your open mind to let the story come to you and to be told. I always say, when people ask me, even when they give me a commission, do I really know what I'm doing? Sometimes I don't, because I'm finding out as an artist. Otherwise, if I knew, I would not be an artist. So.
I was very impressed by the show, the photographs that you showed of your show in Reggio Emilia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not constrained by a gallery. I don't have a gallery, and I think that makes a huge difference to a practice. I think sometimes there are pressures within the gallery industry to create work that's marketable and sellable, and I actively avoid that in my practice. So I think that when I'm making work, subconsciously I'm always thinking about making work that's very fragmented, that you have to work at, and that somehow works best in a book, or, you know, installation work. but it completely varies. But I think that the whole gallery and being represented by a gallery plays a big part with artists.
Thank you. Any other question from the public? Sorry, maybe they'll give you a microphone.
Yeah.
We can. It's very.
So actually have a quite specific question for Mónica that just popped up in my mind when I saw your work. And because one thing that struck me about your work was the styling choice, like the clothes, because I think it was not at all like a neutral choice. So I was wondering like what was the research behind that, or like if it has any meaning like connected to what you said.
Yeah, as I said, I like to listen to the stories of the place, and the places will tell you stories. Some of the images you saw, it was there was some ruins of cities that they were left by Portuguese at the time of the independence when the colonial war started. So there was lots of stories being told on these places, what was left behind, and the presence of different bodies that they were no more there. So the clothes and the set was an enactment of the absence of this presence. So you see like a church that was abandoned completely in the middle of the desert. It's trying to recall these stories and bring out what is not there. So usually I do work a lot with theater, and I do enact my pictures. I don't really do pictures of what I find. I take a long time to see what's there, and I document a lot. So I have two practices. One, there is research and I document, but usually I end up not showing my documental work. That informs me, and then I carry on doing research and let the space tell me what was there. And then I work with actors, and I do film, so I work collaboratively with lots of different people and with writers to kind of bring out the story that was there. So it is a fabulation. So as in any fabulation, there is different archetypal figures I work with. So there is the woman with the dress, white dress, so she recalls what happened within that space, that he brings a sense of epistemology of the North, with acknowledgement that it's very much understanding, you know, the Catholic Western world and what does they carry, that dress that she is wearing, and when she takes it out, how many dresses, because if you go and see the exhibition, she keeps on changing clothes. There is one moment she has too many dresses, she doesn't know what to wear. And this is the weight of history on her body, which skin she needs to take out and put in. And she's always having a mirror to see herself and to face the landscape. And this mirror is a reflection on an oppositional gaze, recalling bell hooks, really breaking out the Eurocentric views. So I don't say that, you know, the clothes or the stage moments, I have a script. This script doesn't come from my studio, it comes from spending time in these places. So, and listening to the stories, and the characters come. Sometimes they are not there because I usually work with stories in Angola of places that they belong to the past, and they also belong now to our own understanding of our own history and where we stand. So it's recalling that, and it's bringing act of understanding. So this is why I recall the cyclical time. What are we repeating? And yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, for having shared with us some of your work. So I think we've done. and enjoy the shows of the three artists and go to Reggio Emilia to see Lisa's show as well. Thank you very much.